Welcome everybody. As you come on in, we will be just waiting a few minutes for more people to join and then just getting started in about 1 minute. As everybody's waiting for us to get started, please jump into the chat. Let us know where you're joining us from, how many people are with you, watching with you on your screen today, and if you're aware of the native lands in which you are on right now, please share that also with us in the chat. I appreciate, Jan, that we have all creatures great and small, and that you're joining us with your dog. That's wonderful. I'd love to know your dog's name. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. For those who just jumped on, please share with us in the chat where you're joining us from, how many people are watching with you, and the native lands on which you are on. As Darren continues to let people who are joining us from all over the place, and those of you who are just joining on, I was just mentioning that please let us know where you're joining us from and how many people are watching with you. And we will get started just shortly. We have a lot of people joining, and we also have a lot of felines and canines joining us, I'm seeing in the chat. So Henry, one of our filmmakers, has his cats with him today. And as we know, in the world of Zoom, cats have been making appearance quite often. So I'm sure we will see them here today as well. If you're just joining us, please share with us in the chat where you're joining us from and how many people are with you today. And I think, Garen, whenever you're ready, we can get started with the introduction to the festival.
Welcome to One Earth's Earth Week Mini Film Festival. In continuing partnership with the City of Chicago, the One Earth team, together with Chicago's Chief Sustainability Officer, Angela Tovar, and her team, invite you to join us in turning the tide on our climate crisis. This week, we're joining forces in using the power of film to create a sea change on topics of environment and those intersected with environment, like racial, social, and economic justice. Here's a brief word from Angela now.
Hello, my name is Angela Tovar, and I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer for the City of Chicago. It's an incredible honor to be here with you and to partner with One Earth to bring you another exciting Earth Day Mini Film Festival. We commend the One Earth Collective for curating this incredible lineup of films and for all of the important programming that they lead year-round to foster thought-provoking dialogues on pressing environmental issues through a justice lens. This Earth Week, the City of Chicago will release its updated climate goals through the 2022 Climate Action Plans to identify new and ambitious targets and to reaffirm our commitment to climate action and the delivery of equitable co-benefits that our communities need to thrive. We look forward to joining you all for an exciting week of film viewing and discourse and a continued partnership to move the city toward a more just and equitable climate future. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela, for your words and for your continuing collaboration. As we celebrate the 52nd anniversary of Earth Day this week, we continue our hybrid fest format presenting virtual and Chicago area in-person events. And we remain committed to our unique community-based model of raising awareness, engaging in dialogue, and being inspired to act on behalf of our one Earth. A powerful image and call to collective action in light of this year's festival theme, Turn the Tide, are the words of Japanese writer Ryunosuke Satoru. Individually, we are one drop. Together, we are an ocean. As always, our agenda will be to introduce you to folks who will join us in a rich discussion after the film, to watch the film together, to unpack the film's themes with our facilitator and panelists. Please participate using the chat. And finally, to share actions we can all take to be part of the solution. I'd now like to make a few brief acknowledgements. First, as we reframe narratives around justice, environment, and equitable solutions to our climate crisis, we acknowledge the many filmmakers and subjects, facilitators, and panelists joining us this week. Thank you. Second, One Earth Collective is based in Chicago, the traditional homelands of the Council of the Three Fires, the Odawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi nations, and home to many other tribes, including today, peoples from over 100 tribal nations. And yet there are no federally recognized tribes in Illinois, due in part to colonization, relocation, and genocide. One Earth commits to including films that center Indigenous stories and voices. Beyond acknowledging the native lands we each occupy, we must lift up and support the work of First Nations groups. If you're in the Chicago area, please support the important work of the American Indian Center Chicago, Indigenous Environmental Network, Shy Nations Youth Council, and others. And watch for Native Truths, Our Voices, Our Stories, an exhibition co-curated by the Field Museum and collaborators from more than 100 tribes, opening next month. A third acknowledgement. Shared agreements can help our conversation remain safe and respectful. When participating today, please put aside your preconceptions, acknowledge your privilege, internalize what you've learned, approach the conversation with respect, engage your active listening, and use I statements and get comfortable with your own story. A quick note before we meet our facilitator and program participants, please amplify today's voices on social media. The hashtags for the festival are hashtag OEFF 2022 and hashtag Turn the Tide. And now I'd like to turn it over to our facilitator to introduce themselves, the panelists, and our film.
Thank you so much, Anna and Angela, and thank you all for joining us. Good evening or morning, wherever you are, and welcome to the first screening of the One Earth Mini Fest screening in honor of Earth Week. Thank you for joining us and for this honorable mention winning screening of the One Earth Young Filmmakers Contest. My name is Sue Crothers, and I am the director of the Young Filmmakers Contest, and I join you today from Sydney, from the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, to offer respect to elders past, present, and future. For 10 years, the Young Filmmakers Contest has been lifting the voices of youth to address the impacts and the inequities of the environmental issues through the creative medium of film. And this year we received 150 submissions, 2 of which were international recognition and 1 of which you will see here this evening. And each year we host this honorable mention event to share more amazing young talent, to lift voices of more young people who not only educate us on environmental issues, but demand action on the climate crisis. And our judges chose 13 films this year to receive honorable awards. And today we'll be sharing 7 of those films with you. And after the screening, we encourage you to visit our website to see the other 6 honorable mention films along with all our 2022 winners from grades 3 through to postgrad. And we're really excited to have a number of our filmmakers here with us today from across the country and across the world. And as you watch their films, I ask you to consider, what can we learn from them? And how can we take their message and act upon it? I also invite you to ask questions in the chat box. So join the conversation with the filmmakers. So let me explain a little bit of how today's screening will work. After each film is screened, we'll enjoy a short Q&A with each filmmaker, and Garen, our tech person behind the scenes, will be screening the films. And before the Q&A, I'll just run through how to ask questions after we've enjoyed that first screening. But in order to have the best quality, Garen is having all of our audience just not be seen on the screen, and he'll bring everyone's faces back in at the end of the program so that we can all be a community again. And if you do have any tech issues, please just type tech support into the chat box and our tech team will be there to help you out. And so with that, let's begin.
The future is in my hands.
My hands.
My hands.
My hands.
Our hands.
What's going to happen to the rest of the world is depending on what us kids are doing now.
And we're watching you.
We're watching you.
Our eyes are peeled.
Because we are leaders.
We are environmentalists. We are filmmakers.
If you're a young filmmaker and you have an idea, you should go ahead and express yourself because we want to hear what you have to say.
Young people really do have the power to change the world.
And now is our time.
Our time.
Our time.
To show up.
Speak up.
And be heard.
Film is powerful, and film changes things.
The One Earth Film Festival's Young Filmmakers Contest.
If you're a young filmmaker
From 3rd grade
To 25, you can submit your film to win prizes and scholarships.
From $100 to $1,000.
plus a matching grant to the nonprofit of your choice.
If this is something that you really want to do, you got to put yourself out there as young as possible.
What are you waiting for?
What are you waiting for?
Start your film today.
Our first film today is a film called Bats and White Nose Syndrome, and is by Henry Sobel, a 6th grader who is homeschooled in Naperville, Illinois. Henry uses pipe cleaners, felt paper and wood to create a very informative animation about a little-known disease that is infecting bat populations. The Young Filmmakers Contest presents Bats and White Nose Syndrome.
Bats are an important part of our ecosystem. Some bats drink nectar, and while they're at it, they pollinate plants. And bats also eat bugs like mosquitoes and locusts, and that allows us and our crops to flourish. But sadly, bats are on decline. More and more species are becoming threatened, endangered, or even extinct. One of their main problems is white nose syndrome, or WNS. A fungus called Pseudogymnoascus destructans, or PD for short, will grow on their faces when they're hibernating, or any other area of exposed fur. It makes bats wake up in hibernation and be super hyperactive. They burn off all their fat reserves and have nothing left for hibernation, so they starve. Bats also suffer from habitat destruction. They live and breed in dead tree holes, but humans keep cutting down dead trees for paper. The solution to bats' problems: bat boxes. The fungus that causes white nose syndrome only grows inside of caves, and since bat boxes are much smaller and made entirely of wood, there is a very low chance that bats will get white nose syndrome while they're hibernating in a bat box. Bat boxes also act as breeding grounds and houses for bats. Stopping the decline of species is an important thing to do. It is a small but important step in restoring our planet. Earth is in big trouble, and we need to save it. If you want to learn more about saving bats from white nose syndrome, you can visit White Nose Syndrome Response Team at whitenosesyndrome.org.
We hope you enjoyed Bats and White Nose Syndrome, and we welcome Henry, and we'd like to hear from you also. So if you can put your messages in the chat or your questions in the chat, Bill and Anna will be monitoring our chat, and they will share the questions with Henry. So I will start the questions, of course. Henry, tell me, you know, this is such an unusual problem. So I'm very curious to know what inspired you to make a film on such an unusual subject.
Well, so I knew I wanted to do a film about animals, or something that will at least raise awareness to save endangered species. And I found that some species of bats are endangered because of this disease after I did some research. And I decided that it's a big problem and we should really bring awareness to it. And there's such a simple solution.
There is such a simple solution. And it's often the simple solutions that actually, you know, can make a world of difference. So, Henry, I'd like you to stay on screen a little bit longer with us. We've got some people in the chat saying, you know, bravo and wonderful, and they're really impressed by the film. And I was wondering if there are any questions out there, Bill, that you have seen in the chat to ask Henry.
May I just say one thing before I start answering questions?
Of course.
My twin sister, who made a movie on pangolins, she could not be here today. And she was also at the screening in March, and she deserves just as much recognition as I am getting.
Well, that is a fabulous, wonderful thing as a brother to recognize your sister and remind everybody. And that is a wonderful film. And we loved pangolins. It's actually one of our honorable mentions, everyone. And unfortunately, she could not be here today to share it with us and be on screen for questions. But we have her hosted with her film on our website. So please, I will be making sure, Henry, everybody visits our website to see all the rest of the honorable mentions. And thank you for highlighting it. And I highly recommend that film as well. She did a great job. So are there any questions we want to share with Henry? Bill, do you have anything?
Yeah, Henry, Steve asks, how did you first hear about white nose syndrome? He learned about it when he went to Mammoth Cave in National Park. So he's just asking yourself, how did you came across it? Sorry.
So I read about the problem in a book. I'm pretty sure the title was I'm sorry, I forget the title, but I read about the problem in the book in a book, and then I went to the website. Sorry, what was the website again? I think it was www.whitenosesyndrome.org, and that gave me all the information I needed to make a project. I learned about how it affects bats on that website, and also about the solution with the bat boxes.
Awesome, thank you.
I think we have some other questions in the chat. Anna, do you see any coming through?
I do. Henry, great job. I have a comment and a question from Susan. Susan says, bravo, high five to your sister too. And what is your next project?
Well, I don't really know yet. I haven't made any plans since I finished my first movie. So I don't really know what my next one's going to be about, but I'm pretty sure.
Perhaps it could be inspiration, Henry, on how to make the bat box and the maintenance. We're seeing questions in the chat about what kind of maintenance is needed in the bat box and how you do it. We had a film once about bee boxes, and they did a how-to. So maybe that's something for inspiration, because I can see people asking how they, do the maintenance on the bat box. I don't know if you came across any of that in your research, so. But you can think about that. So, but thank you so much for making such a wonderful animation. It was enjoyable to watch, but also inspiring and offering information on something that many people don't know affects, such an important creature in our ecosystem. So thank you so much for joining us. I'd like to now move forward with our next film. This is a film by Mason Marably, and the film shows how activism matters and the power of the people can turn tides. Mason is a sixth grader at Williamsburg Middle School in Arlington, Virginia, and his film Stop Pebble Mine is the story about protecting Bristol Bay in Alaska. We present Stop Pebble Mine.
Imagine the beautiful streams filled with poison. Imagine billions of fish disappearing, not being able to live in this water. Imagine all of the wildlife that depend on these fish disappearing with them. For the last 20 years, conservationists from all over the country have been trying to stop a mine from being constructed in Bristol Bay, Alaska. According to the owners of the proposed pebble mine, the project would provide long-term economic benefits from employment and income in the region and state. However, many Alaskans are worried that the mine would harm the wildlife and ecosystem of the Bristol Bay area. Over the years, a Stop Pebble Mine movement has formed to oppose the mine.
The risks from large-scale mining development are far too great for the native people of this land. We will never trade our flourishing lifestyle for short-term interests of a foreign mining company. My name is Dolores Larson. I am the Community Engagement Director for United Tribes of Bristol Bay. Every aspect of our subsistence lifestyle would be affected by Pebble. Our entire lives revolve around our unique way of life. We share a deep connection to our pristine lands, waters, air, and all the natural and renewable resources, the fish, wildlife, wild vegetation, berries, and birds. With every season comes food on the table and that sense of security.
Many people, like Dolores, have been working to stop the pebble mine for 20 years. The proposed location is in southern Alaska, near Bristol Bay. Bristol Bay and the surrounding areas are rich with wildlife and salmon.
If constructed, the Pebble Mine would be the largest open pit gold and copper mine in North America. In addition to the giant hole in the ground, which would be the mine, the project would require a transportation system, a road system, and a pipeline that would extend for miles over the uninterrupted tundra and wetlands and streams of the Bristol Bay region. Bristol Bay is one of the last great salmon systems in the world. Bristol Bay produces about half of the red or sockeye salmon consumed in North America.
Bristol Bay is home to one of the last great salmon systems. People from all over the world came together to stop the pebble mine and protect Bristol Bay and all the salmon that live there.
People from the region, the tribes from the region, commercial fishing groups, sport fishing groups, conservation organizations, groups that are interested in sustainable food production and healthy fisheries and other things. So a coalition grew up to oppose the mine.
The Stop Pebble Mine Coalition was formed to help stop the pebble mine and protect the region from many negative impacts the mine would create.
Most directly are the species that depend on the water. You would have dozens of miles of streams dug up or dewatered. So we would have all types, 5 species of Pacific salmon. We would have trout and Dolly Varden and grayling. And then, of course, the wildlife all depend on the salmon for nutrients. So the bears and the caribou and the eagles and all the birds, really, like, it starts with the nutrients. The whole system starts with the nutrients the salmon bring upriver. So it would have a lot of effect on the fish and wildlife in the area.
In January of 2021, the permit for the proposed pebble mine was denied.
The pebble mine was stopped because people from all parts of the country, and most importantly, people from the communities closest to the pebble deposit, spoke up. I think this is an issue that's an Alaska issue, but it's also a national issue, and every voice counts.
Mason, this is not only a beautiful film to watch, but it's a film that gives us hope. right? That the power of the people and one's voice, every voice counts, right? So, but I'm very curious how you learned about the Pebble Mine.
Yeah, so my dad, he brought it up and he told me about it. And then I did some research about it, and I was very interested in it, and then I decided to make a film about it.
Well, you made a great film about it. It really,
Thank you.
you know, it really was, you know, informative as well as sharing, you know, the solutions. And I can see we have a bunch of people in the chat asking all sorts of questions about the film. And I'm going to hand it over to Anna to ask some questions on behalf of the audience.
Great, thanks, Sue, and thanks for your wonderful film, Mason. So there's a question here. What made you want to make a film about Alaska specifically?
Yeah, so I think Alaska is a very beautiful and interesting place, and the Pebble Mine is something that would really ruin that. And I was just very interested about it all.
And we see more questions coming through. Bill, do you want to ask a couple more of Mason? I can see it popping up in the chat.
Well, I think that Mason is a favorite, crowd favorite, because he's also had another movie last year. So just curious what new projects you have in the works.
Yeah, so I've started working on my next film and doing research about the topic. It's going to be about how fossil fuels are affecting Earth and how renewable energy could change that.
That is a wonderful and very important topic. Mason, just to let the audience know, Mason had a winning film with us last year, and all our films are on our website, so you can certainly go back and view them. There is a question that I saw here, Mason, that says your care for it said, which came first, your care for the environment or your love of filmmaking?
Well, I started, I think probably my love of filmmaking, but one of my first films was a documentary that I made about different wildlife in a park called Huntley Meadows near me, and I think that was my first documentary, and that really inspired me to make more environmental films.
Oh, that's so great. You know, someone in the chat box asked if you're from Alaska, and Mason is actually from Arlington, Virginia. So his passion for the environment certainly goes beyond his beautiful state of Virginia as well. Mason, there are a bunch of questions coming in the chat, and I invite you to, you know, feel free to type in the chat directly to people and answer them, because unfortunately we can't get through all of them live. So if you could do that, that would be great, because I'm sure that they would love to hear from you. Thank you again for making such an incredible film and submitting it again to the One Earth Film Festival. So our next film is we are staying in Alaska, and we have a film by 7th grader Kaylee Dang from Potomac, Maryland, and she narrates a rich story about the Exxon Valdez oil spill of 1989 and the lingering impacts of the environmental impacts on the environment and wildlife. So I'd like to present to you Sealing the Leak.
You are the great Alaska, the last frontier, the land with glaciers, fjords, and America's tallest mountain, the home to bears, caribou, and many other magnificent animals. You are Valdez, the city of fishing, with salmon and halibut. You are the Prince William Sound, where sea otters frolic, stellar sea lions roll around in the sun, and orca whales powerfully dive through the water. But in addition to all this beauty, you are also shadowed by destruction and disaster.
So the Exxon Valdez tanker was leaving the pipeline terminal in the Valdez Arm and headed down to Long Beach, California to take the crude oil it was carrying to the refinery. But shortly after midnight, the tanker ran aground.
Almost 11 million gallons of oil was spilled into the fragile ecosystem of the Prince William Sound. The spilled oil killed hundreds of thousands of animals. Sea otters and birds died from the cold water since their oiled fur and feathers offered them little insulation. Animals licked their oil-covered bodies in an attempt to clean themselves, becoming poisoned by the toxic oil instead. The oil also clogged the blowholes of dolphins and whales, suffocating them and cutting off their communication. Fish were covered by the spilled oil, which also poisoned the animals that ate them. But animals aren't the only ones that were affected by the Exxon Valdez oil spill.
The herring fishery was about 80% of Cordova's income. This was a huge herring town. Everyone here fished salmon and herring, and there was 4 years later no herring fishery, and that has still not recovered.
After the spill, Exxon employees, government responders, and thousands of Alaskan locals worked together to clean up the spill. There were many methods that were used to clean up the oil from the ocean. There were booms, which are large floating barriers in the water that were meant to contain and trap the oil. Skimmers, which were used to get rid of the oil on the surface of the water. These methods were very effective, but there was one thing about the Prince William Sound that the responders struggled with: the beaches.
The surrounding shorelines in Prince William Sound are primarily made up of this material they call boulder cobble or boulder cobble beaches. So they're big rocks, and they're piled up on these beaches, fairly steep beaches, and they're very porous. Oil can go very deep down into those rocks. And so when the oil that came ashore from that incident penetrated not only the shoreline at the surface, but deep down into the substrate. And that makes it very difficult to clean because normal tides would not flush the water out. So the oil, a lot of it was trapped there.
Because the oil was underneath the rocks, the responders had to find a way to flush the oil out. That's why they started using hot water to push the oil away from the land and into the ocean, where it would be easier to clean.
One of the beach cleanup methods that was used it's called hot water deluge. Imagine a fire hose and pumped hot water right into the beaches. And the thought process there was, we'll get the oil up out of the sediment, it'll come back to the surface, go back out towards the water, and then we can kind of soak it up. Or it'll just get mixed back into the water column, but either way it won't be sitting. And basically what that did, instead of what it was supposed to do, is it actually pushed that oil further down into the sediment, and the hot water also killed a lot of the living microorganisms and macroorganisms that were living on the beaches.
Although the Exxon Valdez oil spill had devastating impacts on both people and the environment, it spurred people to take action to help prevent an incident like this from happening again.
The Exxon Valdez resulted in one major piece of legislation, and that was called the Oil Spill Act of 1990. Made a lot of changes in activity. It clearly defined the responsibility of who the owner of the oil was as far as their responsibility for the response and cleanup. It required that ships like the Exxon Valdez, which was a huge tanker, it was like 3 football field long tanker, but vessels that size could not be single hulled, but had to be double hulled. So you had extra insurance to prevent an accident.
The Exxon Valdez oil spill was a very devastating accident, but there are so many other incidents that had an even bigger impact on our planet. The Deepwater Horizon in 2010 spilled 12 times as much oil as the Exxon Valdez. Oil spills are a huge problem, but the good thing is, there are many things that you can do to help prevent oil spills from happening. First, you can stand up for making the transportation of oil safer.
Well, you can be an advocacy for wanting to have safe standards, that there's requirements that we put as much safety we can into the production and the shipping of oil, because the more safety that's put into it, the less the chance, the less the likelihood that you're going to have an incident.
Another way to decrease the risk of an oil spill is by reducing your oil consumption. If the demand for oil goes down, then we won't have as much need for the production and the transportation of oil. So ride a bike or walk instead of driving. Plastic is also created by using petroleum oil, so use reusable water bottles and bags. By being eco-friendly, you can help reduce the risk of an oil spill. And together, we can keep the oil out of our oceans, out of our beaches, and out of the mouths and fur of the animals and organisms that we share this world with. After all, you are the great Alaska, the last frontier, blessed with centuries of life-changing landscapes and views. We can all make a difference.
Thank you, Carly. This is truly a beautiful film. And I love the way that you take Alaska and put her right into the first person. And it gives it an added strength and beauty to it. But the Exxon Valdez oil spill was certainly long before your time, before you were born. So I'm just curious how you learned about it and why you thought it was so important to make a film about it.
Yeah, so over the summer, my family and we took a trip to Alaska, and we took like a cruise around the Prince William Sound, and the captain of the cruise actually introduced us to the Exxon Valdez oil spill. And before that, I'd never heard of it. So it was like really shocking me because like all that oil spilled into such like a beautiful habitat for like animals, organisms. And I really thought that it was devastating because animals and everything else like around us in the world, we all need to protect it. So I went home and I did some research, and I learned that like oil spills are still happening, and so I decided to make a film about it, to spread awareness and to like tell people that they can make a difference.
Well, it was a great documentary piece that you included, you know, historical footage in there. I'm sure it took many hours, and you did a great job. I see things popping up in the chat. Bill, is there anything that you would like to share from the audience with Carly?
Well, I think I share the same sentiments with Sarah, who said this is just like, you know, and not only inspiring film, it's a beautiful film and just captures all the interconnections between politics, action, and actually just, you know, our own choices. But just on that subject, Callie, how has the beaches and the surrounding environment been affected? How is it recuperating? Is it going to be years from now? Is it going to be something that is ever going to recuperate?
Yeah, so it's actually like been recovering very well, and like animals and other organisms, their populations have been growing and getting better. So, yeah.
Without doubt, taking an extremely long time, given that it was back in 1989, but it's still good news to hear that, you know, even it takes time, you know, a moment, a short time to spill and a long time to, you know, look at the impacts and correct the impacts. But it's good news to hear that. I think that everybody is inspired. I would like to ask also, I know I see there's a question about how you chose the music in the film, but so tell us a little bit about how you presented this film, because you did present it in that kind of first person tone with her, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about that and share that with the audience.
Yeah, so I felt that like using like second person and being like you are, we all are, that would like really personalize it for people and like create like a connection with Alaska, because we're all part of this earth, and Alaska and other places all around the world, they're all like a part of it, and we're like personally connected together, because everything we do on a day-to-day basis, it will affect Alaska and like any other place around the world. So I really wanted to like show the connection.
I think it is a wonderful creative way that you did that to personalize it. So it really was very affecting that way. I want to thank you so much for sharing it with us. And I ask you, I see questions popping up in the chat box continuing. If you can connect with the people in the audience and answer their questions directly with them in the chat, that would be great. And thank you, Carly, for sharing such a wonderful film with us and working so hard to create a beautiful piece. Congratulations. Our next film is a journey from the Canary Islands to Barbados. What was encountered along the way is not what was expected. Madeline Toomey narrates a story of her family's adventure using animation to paint a vivid picture of human impacts on our oceans. We'd like to present My Journey Across the Ocean.
3 years ago, I got the opportunity to live on a boat with my family because of my dad's work. I was only 13 at the time and had never spent more than a day at sea in my life. Eventually, we would spend a year living on the boat, traveling through the Mediterranean before crossing the Atlantic Ocean. Just the thought of being beyond the sight of land and out of contact for 20 days was daunting. And surely, Titanic and Jaws didn't really help the idea of being at sea. Needless to say, I wasn't looking forward to spending 3 weeks in a floating fiberglass box with my family in the middle of nowhere. On November 19th, it was time to say goodbye to land and fresh food and head west across the ocean. Within a couple hours of leaving port, the Canary Islands had sunk below the horizon. The 24 boats we began our crossing with had all vanished by the end of the second day. With weather updates coming in daily from our satellite phone, we got a notice of an approaching squall, and within a couple hours, it hit us. The 15-foot swell sent the boat up and down, and we quickly had to reef the sail before it tore to shreds. After a broken halyard and a torn code 0, the wind disappeared completely. The waves followed suit until they too could not venture out as far as we did. It was completely and utterly dead calm. It went on like this for the next week. And so the days blurred together. The nights I had to stand watch were excruciatingly dull. Imagine staring into nothing, looking for nothing. What could we possibly run into in the middle of the ocean? An iceberg? Leonardo DiCaprio? No. It turns out that the biggest danger we faced was a collision with floating trash. Our first piece of ocean debris we came across was a styrofoam box floating on the surface and being pecked away by seabirds. It had been breaking apart, and each of the little pellets were floating every which way. We did our best to scoop the pieces out with a fishing net, and that was when we began our collection of ocean trash. This collection grew every day, with new pieces being scooped out and collected in a corner of the boat. Water bottles, cans, and even a flip-flop were fished out and accumulated on the deck to be thrown away once we finally got to Barbados. Day 16, we rescued the largest piece of trash yet. It was in the middle of a week-long calm. The wind was still MIA, and the only thing disturbing the horizon, other than our wake, was a bobbing propane tank. So we veered off course and passed by the tank to fish it out. It was covered in rust, barnacles, and words in a language I didn't recognize. Wherever it came from, it probably had a pretty interesting story. It could have come from a cargo ship rounding the Cape of Good Hope, or maybe debris from a hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico. Whether the thing tumbled into the ocean by accident, or was intentionally thrown away, we didn't know. Either way, it was added to our pile of junk. A few days later, the trade winds finally caught up to us, and we began sailing again. A pod of dolphins met up with us later on and surfed the bow waves. Then, after 3 weeks at sea, we saw Barbados floating up from the horizon. Finally, our collection could go into a dumpster on the island. Hopefully, it wouldn't find its way back to the sea. For a long time, I'd imagined that the ocean was a big empty space, completely untouched by humans and void of everything but seawater. Living on a boat, you get to see all types of things in the water. Fish, dolphins, turtles, corals. But once you take a closer look, there's usually things that don't belong there. Things humans have left behind or thrown out and forgotten about. Trash. In every corner of the world's water hides pieces of trash. Even where humans have not yet explored, trash usually finds a way of getting there first, even in the middle of the ocean. So I ask you, be mindful of your waste, change a few habits, and you can be the change our oceans need.
Thank you, Madeline, for that wonderful animation. Madeline, who is from Maryland, joins us today from St. Andrews in Scotland, where she is a freshman at St. Andrews University. Thank you so much for joining us, Madeline. Madeline, we know it's very late in Scotland, so we appreciate you staying up for us. In your film, you utilize humor before delving into, really quite shocking negative impacts of human impact on the ocean in places, that you wouldn't expect it, not just on the shorelines, right? You were in the middle of nowhere. So I was just wondering if you could share with us how, you chose humor to include in that, and, what your thoughts were behind that and why you chose this approach.
Yeah, so I definitely wanted the film to be accessible to all ages, adult or like 2-3-year-old. So I wanted it to be animated, and I wanted it to be lighthearted, and comedy and sort of jokes around such kind of a dreadful topic was definitely important. And I just wanted everyone to have a good takeaway and learn something. So, yeah.
Well, I think it was delivered very, very well, and the judges certainly did too. I'm going to hand it over to Bill. I see some questions popping up, or Anna, to share with us some questions from the audience. Anna, would you like to go first?
Sure. Thanks. Great film, Madeline. So the first question I think came in from Sarah, who was very complimentary. She loved your images, thought you were so creative, and had a great sense of humor. And her question was, did what you observed on your travels impact your family's consumption habits while aboard?
We definitely tried not to use that much plastic. Living on a boat, you can't really buy too much. There's not a lot of room to store it. But we did try to buy like food products in bulk, and then where we could buy cardboard. But even cardboard on a boat is a bit iffy with bugs. So yeah, we tried to limit it, but it's also difficult.
I think that goes to show, that mitigate. Sometimes we're not in positions to do reusable items. The single use are part of our lives, despite our best efforts, depending on our situation. But it's a question of mitigating as best we can in the choices that we make, right? So I'm sure that that's another thing that you had to do on a boat, regardless, because it's a limited space. I think there was a question about the boat journey in the chat, and that was, what was it like to be on a boat and live on a boat for so long? I think people are just curious.
Yeah, so I lived on a boat for 2 years. And most days were spent traveling or sailing, but it was mostly motoring because there's no wind a lot, or it was going the opposite direction. But yeah, it was basically sort of a road trip every day, except you're going 6, maybe 7 miles an hour. So very slow. You get seasick if you're not on deck, so you can't hide away and watch a movie while you're moving. But it's also just great family bonding experience. We definitely grew a lot closer because there's no way to separate. So, yeah.
Which is an experience many of us have had during the pandemic now. So I think that even without a boat, we've all had that. Bill, are there any other questions for Madeline?
Yeah, just a great question from Henry on terms of what type of animation app you did. I saw a number of different animations also throughout the judging process, and this was quite unique to some of the others. So I have the same question as Henry did.
Yeah, so I used just Photoshop. It's not really an animating software, but I had already been familiar with it, and my dad taught me. He does also animated little short videos, and he taught me sort of the ins and out of Photoshop animation. I probably wouldn't recommend it for someone doing a longer film or more complicated animations, just because it's a bit, I can't really handle animation that well, but it was pretty good for what I was doing. So
well, I think it worked out very well. And I know, again, I'll ask you to respond in the chat to a lot of the questions that are coming in. But and filmmakers, we know that you like to all sort of talk to each other about different techniques and things like that. So please feel free to chat amongst yourselves in the chat with that too. We do understand that sometimes we're asking questions very much about the topic of the film, but there are techniques in the film that we know you all appreciate. So please go ahead and communicate with each other. And thank you, Madeline, for joining us so late at night. And we wish you best of luck again for the rest of your semesters in St. Andrews. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Our next film is a collaborative effort of 3 filmmakers: Nathan Goswick, Mariel Mudrick, and Liam McCormick, all freshmen at DePaul University in Chicago. In their 3-minute film, How Chicago Rapid Transit is Failing, the filmmakers address the complex issues surrounding the poor use of public transport. We share with you how Chicago's rapid transit is failing.
Does it matter how green public transit is if people still choose to drive? Routinely, with their coffee in their cup holder, fleets of workers drive to work while the L could easily get them there. Or could it? It's no secret that the L is flawed. One of the hardest parts of establishing public transit is making sure that it's actually used to its full potential, and the L is not. We need to make the L safer, quicker, and even more expansive if we want to play our part in stopping climate change. A big problem right now is that public transit doesn't even go to all of the suburbs. And when public transit does reach one of the suburbs, it often takes twice as long to take it to the city. Since we don't have public transit in the places where we need them, cars become the simplest solution. However, cars have actually become the complex problem that the planet is facing. The L will not be beneficial for the environment if we're not provided with closer access and faster service. But what's more terrifying is crime. Right now, us riders are scared off by the lack of safety on the L. But why wouldn't we be, considering that crime on the L still reached over 1,000 cases in 2021, a sobering statistic. What's worse is that not even the police have helped keep us commuters safe. Way too few security measures are present in the CTA trains. The only recent time that crime saw even a noticeable dip was when the CTA dotted thousands of cameras across their stations, like punctuation to their safety statement. But the cameras were actually just commas, as the fear only led to a brief pause in crime. The only way for us to go forward is to provide a safer, greener transit by introducing a dedicated non-police force while encouraging the government to take responsibility for the L's flaws. All of this comes together to make a difficult, unsafe, and uninviting commute. It shouldn't be harder for us to live green. It should be easier. We can't let a system like this stand where it is today, especially a system that is part of our environmental solution. When we create services like the L, the main goal should be making sure that they're actually set up and used to their fullest potential. If we want to cause substantial change, the systems that we put in place must be faster, safer, better, and ultimately the obvious choice for all people, green or otherwise.
Welcome, Nathan, Mariel, and Liam, we're so happy to have you here today. And we do want to hear from all three of you, but I'd like to start by giving Nathan about 30 seconds to expand upon how the issues raised in the film impact the environment.
So one of the major ways that the train system and the transit system in Chicago impacts the environment is by decreasing traffic. It's the most obvious solution to it, which the less cars that we can get on the road where there don't need to be cars, the better our CO2 emissions are going to be. So it really is as simple as that. Is the more people who use transit, the less people drive cars.
Right, and we need it to be able to be used, right? So we appreciate the issues that you brought up with that. I know you worked, it's a team effort, there's animating, editing, there's editing of the film, and the film uses some really great animation. And I'm just curious, I'm going to hand this over to Spencer and Mariel to, take turns in answering. It's like, when it comes to the animation, like, how you chose the type of animation that you did and where the editing comes in to make sure that it goes in the right spot, because it becomes very impactful. And the style that you use is very interesting. So I'm wondering if the two of you can talk to us a little bit about that.
So in terms of the animation, we had multiple parts where we just put in the animations for kind of like aesthetically visual purposes. But in other parts, like the graph, we wanted it to illustrate a statistic. So that's kind of what we did. All of the animations revolved around trains and two colors, red and blue, which are the two train lines that go beneath the city. So that's kind of how it went. I used this one program called Procreate. It's an app on your iPad. You can kind of use it. And we kind of mixed it with Premiere Pro and overlaid it with other graphics.
And Liam, you did some, do you want to share your impact on that and how you, when it comes to the visual effects?
Right. So mainly what most of my work went into was if a shot required more than just what came raw out of the camera, and if we want to do something more creative with it, for example, have like an infinite running train, with a time lapse on the ground and the train being normal motion or slow motion, something like that you couldn't get out of the camera. That was my job, where I would do a process called rotoscoping, take the train out from one shot, put it in another to make one coherent shot, but with a lot of layers to look at, the more you watch it. Interesting stuff like that to keep it as artsy as it really needs to be while still being a grounded video.
Well, it was very artistic, but I think that the narration that you gave, Nathan, was very powerful in conjunction with the animation overlay and the speeding and the slow motion, and yes, we all know those colors of the L for those of us who are from Chicago, and the way that you put that into the credits too was very, very artistic. So I'd like to hand it over to the audience. I see a bunch of questions coming in about the content of the film. So Anna, do you want to take on some of these and share them?
Sure. There's one here from Billa to all of you, asking, did you present the film to anyone in the transportation department who could affect change?
But we just this film specifically for the festival, and we're getting ready to talk on the world. Well, mainly.
I'm sorry, Nathan, I think you're breaking up a bit. I don't know if that's for everybody, but do you want to repeat that?
So our plans are to the film all around Chicago, because we just completed for the specific film festival. So this year, beginning of the L tour.
Beginning of the L tour. That's great.
Yeah.
Bill, do you want to offer any other questions?
Yeah, the film was fantastic in terms of its how it sort of like pulled you in and sort of like sensorially. But there was one question that I had, particularly on who came up with the commas and cameras conjunction with that, and then actually then put it into words, because I thought that was pretty clever.
So, sorry, I just read the comment that my AirPods might be dying, so I took those out. But put together the line of the comments and stuff. It really was just, we were all together writing, and I don't know, it just popped in my mind of connecting one thing to another. And I like to have things like strung along in my film. So it's like a big flowing force throughout the film. But Mariel helped a lot with the writing, and well, we all kind of worked together on it.
Well, I think you all made a very powerful piece, and I do hope that the film does the L tour and goes to the leaders and those that need to hear more about the problems with the L so that we can improve it. I think since the pandemic, we can all agree we haven't utilized the L as much as we did in the past, and it certainly needs to be looked at. So thank you all for making such a powerful film. We appreciate it greatly, and thank you for joining us today, and we hope to see more from you. Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to move on. We go on the theme of animation. We are returning to a full animated film. Climate Change: A Call to Action is another collaborative effort. It's a collaborative film created by Grace Cancian, Jason Chan, Sergei Lefebvre, at Parker McKenzie, and Spencer Stanky, juniors and seniors at the University of Connecticut. And this group of motion and animation students take scientific data to create a simple animation to help the audience digest it in an easy way. We present Climate Change: A Call to Action.
Picture this. You're on a boat in the middle of the ocean, surrounded by sharks. But have no fear, you are safe. Unless we do this, or even this. Now you have two options. You can either patch up the boat, or stay put, let the boat sink, and get brutally devoured by sharks. That's the response we as human beings have been taking regarding planet Earth and climate change. Our friend, Dr. Alice Duvivier, a polar climate scientist at the National Center for Atmospheric Research, known as NCAR, in Boulder, Colorado, can explain.
The types of climate change that we're experiencing right now are caused by human activities and the emission of greenhouse gases.
This human activity includes the burning of fossil fuels, deforestation, animal farming, and several other industrial productions. Consequently, this has led to a negative impact on ecosystems and animals all around the world.
There are natural things that can change our climate. So things like volcanic eruptions can change the climate by shooting aerosols very high in the stratosphere. There are also changes that can happen in the Earth's orbit. Those happen over tens or hundreds of thousands of years. There are changes in solar radiation, but again, those happen on pretty long timescales. And we've been able to measure that, and we know that that hasn't changed recently. So really what's making the recent changes happen is the human element and what we're adding to the atmosphere. And what makes it really unique is the rate at which it's happening. There have been times in the past when it's been warmer than it is now, or it's been a lot colder than it is now, or there's been as much CO2 in the atmosphere as there is now. But the difference is that that happened over tens to hundreds of thousands or millions of years, not over the last about 150 years as we've observed recently. And it's that rate of change that makes me really concerned.
Long story short, our collective boat is sinking, and quickly. So what are we doing?
My work is the type of fundamental research with climate models that helps inform policymakers about what might happen with the different choices we make. So in that sense, my work has provided data about what might happen with climate change. I don't feel like I personally have the answers that are the whole puzzle, like what we can do, but I work on pieces of that puzzle.
Globally, there have been strides towards normalizing concepts such as net zero emissions or limits in global mean temperature increase. Some nations are actively working to reduce emissions at a large scale. Sometimes the actions are more local. In the United States, the town of Burlington, Vermont now runs entirely on renewable energy. Other locations such as Georgetown, Texas, and Aspen, Colorado are pushing to do the same. Great. So some places are making some changes. A select few are doing all they can to keep our boat operational. However, these areas only have so many repairs to go around. We need to be doing more, globally and locally. And fortunately for us, change can start with you.
But I do think that it would be helpful that people at least have a basic understanding of science and how it works. My experience, at least, is that schools emphasize physics, chemistry, and biology, but they don't really delve into Earth system science. Earth science is incredibly complex because you're kind of at the union of physics and chemistry and biology.
Taking some time to learn about the Earth not only helps you understand what's happening, but it also allows you to articulate to others how important it is that we protect our planet. Educating ourselves about the climate crisis is an essential first step, but the actions we take using that knowledge is even more important.
I think the immediate thing to do is that people can take their own individual actions to build some of that momentum and prevent the climate anxiety from being completely overwhelming. I think it's more important to do just a little bit. I bike almost everywhere. I have solar panels on my house. I try to limit my energy and water usage. I limit my air travel whenever possible.
These are only some of the many small steps you can take to help fix our planet. We urge you to repair our boat. There is no other option. Everyone is in this together, and it is up to us to work together to mend our planet. No action is too small. Every restoration counts. Will you join our collective efforts to keep our planet afloat? We have three of the filmmakers from this piece with us today, Grace, Jason, and Spencer. And welcome to you all. You know, what was intriguing about this film is that this is a very informative and interview style. Well, it is an interview, a narration. The narration is very, very dense with information. And it is a very much like a live interview, but you've utilized this very, very simple animation to present the information. And so, Spencer, I'd like to start with you by asking, you know, if you could elaborate on that, on the choice that you made with this. Specifically on like the animation style, or
yeah, like the denseness of the because it's really like a public announcement kind of animation, right? But you have this really, really intriguing and dense interview that you've got going on. So how did you marry those two things together, and what made you choose like that the topic to go with this animation?
Right. So it was a couple decisions we had to make when we were working on the project and building it. Because we knew it was going to be information dense, I think we decided that we wanted to lean a little bit more simpler just on the visual aspects, because too much, you know, it can be hard to understand. And also just the simpler style too makes it easier for us, just because, you know, because it was so information dense, there's a lot of like specific things you need to show off. So making the animation easier allows us more time to, you know, clean up and make things look nice. Yeah, I think that's about it.
No, I think it's really great. And I know we talked about, you know, it makes one really pay attention to the content, right? Because so often when you've got all these beautiful visuals, we can get distracted. And, you know, even though it can be a powerful message as well. What I think the judges found in this film is that you really paid attention to the content. So it was a great choice. I won't suck up the oxygen here. Bill, or is there anything in the chat to ask questions of Grace and Jason and
Yes,
Spencer?
Yeah, Sarah was asking on the professor who did an excellent job as a resource and sort of like walked through that whole film and all the points. But were there other people that also inspired you or gave you insights that you needed to build the film a little bit, or was this all just a very, very tight resource type of film?
Our professor did such a great job, Anna Lindemann, of really like making us excited about this project and excited about going forward with something environmental based. And especially because she worked with Alice Duvier, that was kind of a close-knit community between the 5 of us and then the 2 of them. But it was really powerful to hear what Alice Duvivier had to say, because she was so passionate about what she did that it made us all so excited to work on this project. And I think it made the project better because we could tell how much she cared and how important her message is to spread.
I think that, you know, having a professor who is really engaged that way is really wonderful. So kudos to your professor as well. And I'm sure that you enjoy working with her. Jason, can you share with us a little bit about how the 3 of you work together on this piece? Like, you know, how collaborative and how you worked on that to make sure you got the outcome you were looking for?
So we basically split up our work. So Grace did a decent amount of the illustration. Spencer and I, we did some of the animation, and Spencer also did some of the editing with like sound and whatnot.
And there were others there. I know there's questions in the chat about, you know, you had 5 students working on this together. So did you all have to break up a little bit, you know, or did you all come together at all times?
So we kind of like divided and conquered the roles and tasks. So Parker, he did a decent amount of the character animation. So the rest of us, like Spencer, Sergey and I, we did some of the like overall animation, and Parker, he did the final touches with the character animation.
Well, thank you so much for all coming together as a team and doing that. It really was a really powerful film, and you know, I hope that the audience takes away a lot of that information and uses it to take action, because it really was great. So we thank you all for making it, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our final film today is a very, very special emotional piece brought to us by a young student from Turkey. Sezgin Yüksel attends Muğla Sitki Koçman University. His film is named Koku, which translates to scent, and it offers a dystopian world without the beauty of nature or access to clean air. Sezgin does not speak English, but as you will soon see, this incredibly creative and touching film needs no language to remind us all of what's at stake. We'd like to present Koku. So, wow. Seskin sent us his translated comments about his film. And when I read them, I'll be honest that they brought tears to my eyes. He said, I wanted to shoot a movie about how we increasingly are becoming a deserted and decolorized world. And with the pandemic lockdown, there was nobody on the streets. So I saw it as an opportunity. And it is how we will see the world in the future. And I finished the film with color because I wanted the audience to be hopeful for our future. Seskin's film reminds us that we all breathe the same air, we all live on the same planet, and we all face the same climate crisis. I want to thank you all for joining us today, and a special congratulations and thank you to all these amazing young filmmakers. They are our future and we honor them. And these films address a number of climate crisis issues. And so when you leave today, we ask that you consider 4 simple actions. Support youth. They have a lot to say, and we need to be listening to them. Educate yourself about how our impact on the planet and how we impact the planet. Support renewable energy, and above all, connect with nature. There's a QR code on the screen here that you'll see, and you can click on it to go directly to find ways to take action. And before I bid you farewell, I'd also like to offer a special thanks to our jury made up of 16 film and environmental professionals. They volunteer their time and talents, and Lisa and I are eternally grateful. And speaking of Lisa, you've all met her in one way or another, whether it be via an email or a text. This contest wouldn't run well without her. So thank you, Lisa. I am eternally grateful. And a special thanks to the Illinois Arts Council for sponsoring this mini fest and this particular screening. And also a special thanks to the City of Chicago. We would love to get your feedback. So we ask that you visit our website, and there's a survey form, and you can share with us your thoughts on the screening. And of course, join us next over this week to continue and see some wonderful, incredible films. You can visit our website to get a full lineup of all the screenings. And in closing, I'd like to ask that you join youth in reclaiming their future. And I leave you with a quote from a young environmental activist named Vanessa Nakate. We need to continue holding leaders accountable for their actions. We cannot keep quiet about climate injustice. And I think we all saw that today on these screenings. I thank you very much for joining us, and I wish you all a wonderful evening or morning, wherever you may be. Thank you.